Lewis, Alan, morning. Thank you very much. Well, it's morning to me. It's late afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining me. I reached out to you because I really enjoyed the four blogs that you've put out quite recently, trying to challenge the PE profession as I do to think about how can we make the most of the circumstances we're in. And I guess what I wanted to try and explore with you today is a little bit of the thinking that went on behind that framework. But for those people that haven't managed to find time to read those blogs, I thought we might start with just a bit of context setting. So whether it's worth you sharing, I know you work at the British School Manila, but what does that look like? What's everyday PE look like in your context? What curriculum do you follow?
Yeah, British School Manila is a 3 to 18 British school in the Philippines, in the capital city of Manila. We've got approximately 1,000 students. It's quite an affluent fee-paying school. Students from a range of nationalities, approximately 70 different nationalities. We've got bankers' children, politicians' children, film star children. We've got every type of child you could wish to have. We accept British passport holders and Commonwealth, and then there's a huge waiting list of places to join the school. It's a highly successful school in Southeast Asia. We follow loosely the British national curriculum, but we don't have to be rigid on that. We're very lucky that we can then tweak and change our curriculum according to the best practice from around the world, which is fantastic. We do GCSEs, a mixture of the new style grading, and we do IGCSE as well. And then we move on to international baccalaureate, because we have a lot of students who move on to America who prefer to go down that line than the A-level line. So it's a really good grounding for preparation for university.
And can I just stop you on that, Alan? The vast majority of our listeners, I should imagine, really understand the English curriculum and the GCSE route. But in terms of the IBAC, what does that look like?
The International Baccalaureate, it was actually founded by a group of diplomats many years ago for international schools. It goes away from specialising in, say, 3 A-levels and moves across a much broader spectrum of 6 different core subjects. And you can study them at higher level or standard level. But the real key to IB is then the broader learning. So you have to be involved in community service. You have to do an extended essay, which when I read them and mark them, it's almost like a mini dissertation. And they also have to study something called theory of knowledge, which is a little bit like old school philosophy. So it's much broader education than A-levels. And having done A-levels myself, I wish I could have done IB, to be quite honest. And being a parent out here, I would really love my kid to go on and do the IB compared to A-levels. I just think it gives you a much broader education. Similarly, though, if you want to specialise early on, A-levels are for you. But it's just a nice contrast to have been in a situation that allows to see IB.
Yeah, and it sounds like it not only does it deepen people's learning and their thinking, but it also has that international currency. So it's something that I should imagine you have quite a lot of your population will perhaps move as their parents move with work. So it's about being able to adapt to that. Okay.
That's exactly right, yeah. In terms of the curriculum that we operate in a little bit more depth, we just wrote an article on infinite learning, where we've coined the phrase, there's so many approaches to learning out there. I mean, our school's massive on concept-based learning at the moment, and you'll hear phrases like student-centered learning, got visible learning from Hattie. We just try and use the best bits of everything to make it real for our context and to make every child learn, which is student-centered learning effectively. Primary-wise, we use the best bits of the real PE curriculum from Create Development in the UK with Ronnie Heath.
Yeah, I know Ronnie.
Combine that with the Canadian Play Fund and physical literacy and fundamental movement skills. Our key driving force is physical literacy in primary school. And Lewis will probably talk a little bit more now about our new Key Stage 3 PE Health and Wellbeing framework.
Yeah, cheers, Alan. Hi, Will. Thanks for having us. In terms of Key Stage 3, we looked at our model of Key Stage 3, and you look around the world at lots of models of Key Stage 3 PE. The vast majority are sport-based. You have a half term on one sport and another half term on another sport, and the medium-term planning that goes through that is often largely skill and technical focuses, and very little of anything else. And we started to question that a little while ago now, many years ago, and we started to look at why we were doing what we were doing, and we started to consider other ways of it. And like Alan touched upon there, we started to look at things the other way. So rather than watering down sport so it was accessible for Key Stage 3 students in terms of modified volleyball or lower nets or a different kind of implement being used for some practices, instead we started to look at what actually the children were struggling with and what they needed to have to be able to access the games and access the sports a little bit better. And from that thinking, we went on a journey that took many twists and turns and had many bumps in the road. And we ended up looking at a model that we've written about in some of our work around learning, linking and transferring skills, and looking at that bigger picture of why do we actually educate children, and why do they have PE in schools. And there's been a phrase for many years of a hidden curriculum that we've talked about before, and a hidden curriculum being all those values and fantastic life skills and transferable skills that students need in adulthood as well as throughout their schooling years. And the hidden curriculum almost doesn't do that justice, and the fact that it's hidden and taboo seems a little bit strange to us. So we started to look at, well, actually, if these things are so important, why are they hidden? Let's bring them out into the light a little bit, and let's say these are the things we're going to focus on. And that's what we started to do. And our Key Stage 3 curriculum now is very much based upon well-being. It has elements of physical literacy in there, as does all our PE from EYFS all the way to Year 9. And we're starting to look at that infinite model and trying to think of, nothing is off limits. Nothing is an idea that's too ridiculous if it suits our context and it suits the situation that we're in. So the units that we have at the moment for Key Stage 3, rather than being, to go back to what I said earlier about having a volleyball unit for a half term, or football or basketball, and teaching dribbling and teaching defense and teaching layups, instead we've gone the other way and started to bring that hidden curriculum to the forefront. And we actually created a well-being framework in our school, not us personally. That was a real school effort led by our head of secondary school and our ex-head teacher. And we look at an active and balanced lifestyle and what makes that up, and why that's important. We look at a capacity for growth and resilience, and the mindset of a child, and why it's important to persevere. We look heavily at self-regulation and how important that is. We know self-regulation is a better indicator of success in adulthood than an IQ score. And that to us was really solid evidence of why it's so important to be organised. And if you've ever done your dissertation at 3 a.m. in the morning because you've left it too late, you know that you want to try and avoid those situations. And if we can give children some self-regulatory skills, that helps. We also look at self-acceptance and trying to let children figure out where they're at and why they're there, and accept that and not run away from that, and not think that that's something to be ashamed of or something that they need to alter immediately, but instead give them the tools to consider why they're there and what they can do to improve, and how they can push on. And finally, we look at a sense of belonging and how we create togetherness in groups, and how we create a team ethic and a culture towards moving forwards together. And that replaces the standard sports or generic units of invasion games, net games, etc., that happen sometimes and have happened certainly for us in the past in PE. And it just gave us a new perspective, and we're very fortunate. We work with an incredible group of people that we can't praise enough in terms of how well they took on this challenge of looking at well-being and looking at PE from a well-being lens, with physical literacy and with transferable skills at the heart of it. And we share practice. We're constantly discussing with each other at the end of the units, and we team plan together for lessons. We reflect at the end of lessons and end of units. And we learn as we go along, and we don't have all the answers. And I think that that's a really important message to get across, that you don't have to have everything dotted and crossed to start something new. Half of the learning process and the fun in it is actually working it out as you go along a little bit, and embracing that journey and accepting that you won't have all the answers. And that's why we started to do some of the articles and the writing that we have done, because we wanted to reflect on our time at BSM. We've worked together for the past 7 years. Alan's actually been at BSM for 8 years. And we never had the time to do it. We never found the time to actually sit down and think about the journey we've been on. One of the first things we did 8 years ago was write a 5-year plan that we look at now and laugh because we ended up nowhere near that 5-year plan, but instead went in very different directions that led us to a place that we're incredibly proud of at the moment. We're not a finished article, far from it. There's lots to do, but we've had a lot of fun along the way, and just reflecting on that and listening to the different conversations that it started across the world really has been incredibly powerful. And we've been really, really pleased with the response that we've had from practitioners, educators, from higher education authorities and governing bodies and all sorts that we've spoken to. It's been really, really touching in terms of feeling like we can help and actually give something and reach out and support other people.
Well, like I said, I really enjoyed reading your blogs, which is why I reached out to you. And I think for so many practitioners, A, they're far too busy in the day job to be able to do the journaling, the capturing of that thought process. But B, I think sometimes as teachers, we think that some superior being will be doing some of that thought-provoking, rather than and thinking that, well, until I've established a perfect model, I don't want to share it, rather than going, well, you know what, I'm really happy to share my thought process and that I'm at version 2.0 or 2.1. And if you wait for perfect on paper, you will never publish anything, you'll never share anything, and you'll never move it on for your school. So I don't know if you've come across You Spot Trust, My Personal Best materials, but that's all very much, as you say, teaching explicit life skills through PE. How do we make sure that it's not just little Allens, Wills and Lewises that leave PE with those extra skill set because they thrive in that environment? How do we get the little non-Will Swayzes to leave with all those tools for life as well? So brilliant. That's been really interesting. And I guess it's painted a nice picture of what you've started to create pre-pandemic. I guess what I'd quite like to explore is, so what are you doing right now? I believe you're at quite a severe state of lockdown, aren't you, as we record?
Yeah, we were just working it out. Actually, it feels longer than what it actually is. We're on about 11th week of distance learning. Distance learning, online learning, whatever you want to call it. It's using a computer to try and deliver a PE lesson, and which is not ideal in its context anyway. We learned from China, we learned from New Zealand, and that was really important, that we weren't going in blind, and you learn from the best practitioners out there. And for me, that's the most positive experience coming out of the whole pandemic, is the global PLC that's been created in PE. It's absolutely phenomenal. Like, we wouldn't be talking now if this hadn't happened, and that's just being honest. We don't get the time, as you just alluded to. We'll be on fixtures every weekend. We're not getting in till 7, 8 at night. We're then doing our marking, our prep. We just wouldn't have this opportunity. So for me, it's a real bonus that we're getting this chance to talk about education, and long may it continue afterwards. I doubt if it will when we're all busy again, but it's a starting point to have a PLC.
And some education systems, I think Singapore, for example, invests far more heavily in that ongoing CPD and self-reflection, whereas I think in England we're guilty of, we shoehorn performance management and some CPD into an already hectic life, and it turns into the nice to do rather than the, you're a busy operator, but you can't operate effectively if you don't have quality time to do that stuff.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, we're very lucky internationally that at British School Manila and across Asia, we do have significant CPD time, and we've got generous staffing that allows huge collaboration for professional development. So we're lucky, and I appreciate in the UK that in a state school, and I've worked there, it doesn't happen as much. But in terms of where we're at now, is trying to keep the E&PE at start. We tried to be quite short term in that first 3 weeks, and thinking that we were going back to school, and really looking back on it, we should have been planning for the long term. We're not going back this year now. We know that we're not going back until end of August at British School Manila, and making sure that less is more. you see that there's huge amounts of content out there, and kids are overwhelmed with it. And I'm lucky that I've got 10-year-old twins in year 6, and I see how overwhelmed they are with all the work, and fitting in the physical exercise around that is really tough. It's really tough, but it's so important that they get that break from Zoom. There's some really good stuff out there about Zoom fatigue, and I feel it. If I've been on the Zoom for 3 consecutive lessons, my eyes are all over the place, they're bloodshot. You're in a different space. So it's really important that we get that EMP across. And certainly an example that we've got from Key Stage 3 is that we're using Zoom, and we're having that connection, that face-to-face connection, which is super important. And sometimes you're just asking the children, how are you? How's your day been? What have you had any connection with your friends? Yeah. And then you're bringing in the physical activity. Now, we've seen a lot of it around the world where it is Joe Wick style, but for us, that's not enough. And we made a decision that physical activity is not physical education.
Yeah.
And we've brought in significant amounts of reflection time and target setting and improvement tasks to bring the E back into PE. We're not just going on there and doing aerobics. It's got to have a product that they can come back to, so that we can then show progression.
Yeah, and create that two-way dialogue. And that's how the thing we struggle with, isn't it, over Zoom. Lewis, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, you touched upon earlier the fact that things shouldn't be put out there, or people's perceptions that things shouldn't be put out there until you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. And I think what we see everywhere, and what we have to role model as educators and PE teachers, is it's all right to not have the answers and to show that vulnerability. And certainly the best conversations I've had personally, just anecdotally, with students throughout all this within Zoom lessons, have been the ones where you put your hands up as a teacher and you say, I have no idea how to do this. I've not been taught how to use Zoom, and we're going on a learning journey together. And what kind of things do you like, and what kind of things would you want to see? And obviously there are some suggestions that are never going to happen, but generally children take that on really well, and they want to buy into the fact that, this person's given us a chance and a voice, as you mentioned a moment ago, and an opinion. And, even simple things like, obviously not everybody is using online learning, and I appreciate that. And every school's got their difficulties with it, but using Zoom, we found that breakout rooms work quite well to facilitate discussion and to have children in small groups. And we almost frame that in a way that's like normal school. You're sat on a desk with 2 or 3 other people, and of course you can have a conversation as you do your work, and we'll pop into that breakout room and have a chat with those students and see how they're doing. And it's that collaboration that a lot of PE misses, that real-time assessment, that stopping children in the moment, that collaboration, that correcting of what's going wrong, that the learning moments are really difficult to create online. And although we haven't got that right, I don't think we haven't nailed that and replicated it well. We certainly have got now a model that's having an educational part to the physical as well. And there is chance for physical activity. There is time for children to reflect. And we do make sure that children have the opportunity to work on something within the wellbeing framework. And quite timely that has been self-regulation through this time. And what have they found difficult about creating time for exercise? And some of the suggestions that children have had about how they can create time for exercise have been really good. I've shared some of the ideas that I have around creating time for exercise, and suddenly you've got students getting up and putting on their workout gear, because if they put it on in the morning, then they might feel a bit more motivated. You've got children disabling apps on their mobile phone because they know that might distract them. You've got children using Habitica, which is a gaming app that sort of gamifies their life and gives them reward points for doing the things that they've set out to do, which one of our children told us about. So just having those conversations and letting children focus on those things has been really cool as well. And again, that comes from us role modeling that humility of the situation and saying, listen, we'd like your ideas and we want to know how you're doing. And our children have responded incredibly well to that. And it's gave us a chance to get to know them and to continue to get to know them and to continue the relationships we had, rather than it necessarily being just, record the physical activity you've done and let's move on.
Yeah, that whole, and again, it's for me, the thing that PE does so well for people, or can do so well for people, is help them be more human. But I think that needs to be role modeled, as you say, by teachers going, I'm not the expert. And you know what? The children love that, don't they? The opportunity to be learning with you, not from you.
You do, and a lot of the work that we're doing in schools, and a lot of the stuff that we worked out around the article of infinite learning that we wrote, made us realize that some of the best work that we've done has been collaborative work with others in our department, where they've shared ideas. And again, I'm incredibly thankful to work with great people. And also when we've given the children the opportunity to choose, and Alan brought in a few years ago within curriculum PE, the opportunity for children to choose activities or choose units based upon their physical literacy scores that suited them. So if they're in a certain band of physical literacy score, there's a couple of options there that are really going to help you in terms of learning, linking and transferring. If those physical literacy scores are a bit higher, here's some options that might be better for you. And just by giving the children that chance and that freedom of choice, created that buy-in and that trust and that opportunity for children to think, hello, this is really cool. I'm getting to choose something that I like, and it's clear what I'm choosing, and it's designed around me. And again, that works for us. And in our locality and the resources we have, we're fortunate to be able to be creative and think of ways to do that. It might not work for everyone, but I think the key message we're really trying to get across is that it's not about picking up a cookie cutter curriculum and dumping it in your school and expecting everything to work. And going back again to what you said earlier about there might be schools and PE teachers out there that are waiting for some kind of governing body or higher power to say, right, this is what you must do. And you're right, I don't think that is necessarily the right way. And I think the best way for that to happen is school by school, and using the expertise in your department and using what you've got in terms of reflection and forward planning to do the best job that you can possibly do in the constraints that you have. And that's going to be challenged, obviously, with our return to school after the pandemic. But that's a real opportunity, and it's trying to frame it in that way, that it might be scary because it's something that's different, but that doesn't mean it's wrong and it's something that shouldn't happen. Let's look at the opportunities and see what we can do to try and push PE on and take it away from just being delivered sports.
So I think the two bits I'm taking from that are, firstly, there's some really rich learning that has potentially happened at this moment, whether it be a formal, activity log or diary that students have been taking, or just but some of that, how exercise has made them feel, or how they've connected with it, or what they've missed from it potentially with some of the team game stuff. So there's been a golden opportunity to have some rich learning whilst lockdown's been in place. And then I guess the second bit is that 80-20 rule of probably think carefully about the things that you do going forwards that will have the biggest impact, rather than being crazy busy doing lots, but it not necessarily impacting on their experiences or what they take away from the subject.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the main thing, and the thing that we've really realised the more that we've thought about this, is it's just a time to pause and stop and ask that question, why? Why are we doing it? And if the answer is, well, we've always done it this way, or the answer is, well, that's the way that we're used to, or anything similar, is that enough? And is that correct? And is that right on the child and the people that are coming through your school and your education system? And personally, my answer would be no, it's not. So we've got to go back and look at what you actually want those children to leave the school equipped with. And if it is that your school is a strong independent school in the UK that is very focused on sports and traditional games, and that's your school's focus and that's what you're dealing with, then your vision and the way that you do things is going to be really different, because that's what you're about and that's what you really want to go towards. If you have a bit more freedom and creativity and you feel that really your passion and your vision is more upon, like we are, transferable skills for students, it's not necessarily meaning that they're great at sport in adulthood, but actually appreciating the things that you can get from being in teams and from collaborating and from having a strong set of values and understanding your own well-being and being able to self-regulate through the vehicle of physical activity and sport. For us, that's what we're going towards, and that has given us more time in this context to think about that and think about the reasons why.
I'm conscious we could talk on this all day, but the other bit that I'd really like to get from you is you've done a bit of this kind of future gazing through your blogs, and I'm sure people will navigate and have a good read of that. But perhaps if I come to you first, Alan, Looking at the future of PE, have you got any predictions for what it might, could, should look like going forwards?
Yeah, it's a holy grail question, isn't it? I don't think there's one single answer out there, and Lewis has just alluded to it, that each school is unique. Every child is unique. We've got different contexts, we've got different rules, we've got different guidelines, we've got budget issues, we've got staffing, and we have to deal with what you've got. Yeah. There's an expression we like to use, we can only control what we can control. And you think of it as your pile of Lego bricks. Each school is going to build something totally different, and it just depends on your parameters. We keep coming back to the why, and we like to use Simon Sinek and his Infinite Game and his other two books before that. You've got to have a strong why. Everything is built upon your just cause, as it's known. Once you've got that, you can then plan whatever you'd like to do within your parameters from that. In terms of where I personally think it's going with research across the world, I think we're heading towards a health and well-being sort of context rather than games. And we are health and well-being and PE teachers, and we're not just teaching football, cricket and rugby. I think that's the way it's going, and looking at the models in New Zealand and Canada and Australia, I'm leaning towards that, and certainly what with the work we've been doing at British School Manila is tending to be more down that line than it is the traditional British curriculum. Yeah. In terms of where PE is and sport, I think there's more now of a shift that PE is about the education, it's about the physical literacy, it's about the values, and sport is going to be about, if you want to go and play your football and your rugby, you want to develop those skills, you go and do that in your extracurricular program. That's just my views. I know there's many views out there. Yeah, I'm sure.
I should imagine, like me, Alan, you don't see sport as a dirty word, and you know the great things that come from sport, but at the same time, it's using the right tool for the right job and at the right time.
You're exactly right. And we were having a conversation about this the other day, and we're saying, well, you're teaching a basketball lesson, for example, and you've got low ability kids, and you're trying to teach them a layup because it's on your unit plan that you've got to teach shooting and it's a layup. And 19 out of 25 kids might not be able to do it, and you're still at them doing it and thinking, why? What's the point? What we're trying to get at here? And it's bringing it back to the why. Well, why are we teaching basketball when these kids clearly don't enjoy basketball? Could be doing something that's a useful, transferable skill when they leave. Now, you could use basketball in a context of developing collaboration and communication and frame the lesson around that. And we've done that. And resilience, when they're failing and developing a growth mindset. But I think the way that it's going is values-driven, concept-based learning in that respect. I know I'm throwing some jargon out there, but it's about the student. It's about what useful transferable skills can we actually deliver that they can then leave the school and go into a job that doesn't even exist yet, and think, you know what, I've got some skills. I might not be able to lay up, but you know what, I can collaborate really well in a team.
Yeah. And just to add to that, in terms of sport, we're both sporty people. We still watch and participate in sport. We love sport, and most PE teachers do. Sport isn't going to not exist. It's not going to be redundant. And I think a lot of what Alan alluded to there is exactly where we're at with, sport maybe seeping into PE and PE lessons being about preparing teams or dividing people based on the sport teams they're in after school. And really we found with the depth of our programs and how they've progressed in being inclusive and giving children the option of choosing sports that they want to choose, and with the freedom in that, we found that actually the level and profile of the sports in our school has only risen by taking away that almost elitism, which is a word I hate using when children are involved. But without that there, and without that drive to be the best, and more of a focus on developing everybody, we've found that that's really, really helped. And to nip back to what Alan said earlier, all these things we've talked about, the transferable skills, the values, they can all be taught incredibly well with sport as the vehicle and with competitive sport as the vehicle. All we're saying is it's not the only way. And there are other ways that you can do that within a PE curriculum that doesn't suit children in terms of their sporting ability or their enthusiasm towards it, but instead don't replicate what you do in your extracurricular programs. And most schools have got some fantastic stuff going on extracurricular. Embrace that and let that be about rules and regulations. Let that be about technicalities of specific sports. Let that be about the coaches showing a passion for that sport and pushing that sport and pushing those students. Let PE be more about the education side of things and using the subject as a real vehicle to prepare children for leaving school, for adulthood, and for all those transferable skills and values that are going to help them in an absolute myriad of different things. You know, everybody, I think, who's a teacher would agree that attitude is so much more important than skill level in anything that you coach and any kind of child you come across. And I think that's important moving forward, that we need to demonstrate that to children and really reward the attitude and the effort and the skills that they're showing to be able to get to the performance if that's right for them.
Yeah. I often, when I'm doing teacher ed stuff, I draw a picture of the car and I say, right, this is your vehicle. You can choose for it to, you know, pick your favourite sport that you love delivering in school. So I'm a racket sportsman. I hate teaching. Well, I've never worked at a school with squash courts, but I would hate to teach squash in a comprehensive school system. I love teaching rugby and basketball because of what I can use that vehicle for. But I always talk about, well, the skills and the knowledge are almost your wheels, and the attitude stuff is what's under the bonnet. And how do you use that vehicle to deliver specific attitude, skills and knowledge that will benefit that group you've got in front of you? Not, going back to your point, Alan, how do you use basketball to teach the layup? It's about the other bits you get from that sport that matters more. And I think
that one, I like that one. And I'd even go a step further of suggesting if it's under the bonnet, it's still hidden. It's still taboo. It's still something that we want to get out of that bonnet and stick the spare wheels on and say, these are the things that actually drive you there. And it's all attitude. It's all transferable skills. It's all values. Actually, the brass tacks of how the car works and the bits and bobs inside are the skills. But to really get to where you want to go, you've got to make those skills and those values the focus and the thing that moves and shifts the thing in the first place.
Maybe the values is the steering wheel then.
And then, hey, like it.
Again, conscious of time, and we need to wrap this up and let you get back to your evenings. But the other bit that I think I tuned into your conversation with Neil from PADSIS, and the bit that you touched on there that we've not covered in this is that point of, just because you focus in on PE and physical literacy and fundamental movement skills and concepts-based learning, that hasn't had a negative impact on your sporting success, has it? Is that fair to say? And if anything, almost some of the stuff you read in Range and the Infinite Game and whatever else, it's helped that blossom more.
Yeah, there's the
exactly right.
Yeah, there's the interesting Federer versus Tiger Woods debate in Range, isn't there, of specialising early in things. I think you are exactly right. We've seen nothing but a positive effect. And a lot of that was because of the patience of the coaches and the staff and in some ways the guidance we gave them, the education we gave the parents, but just getting everybody again to pause and take a step back and say, well, look what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to be the best school in Asia at sport. That isn't our role here. What we want are students that might leave BSM to go to another school and the teacher says, wow, look at them. They've got a great attitude. They're coachable. They're fantastic young men and women. That's big for us, as is asking an adult that's been to BSM and what did you learn from PE and them saying transferable skills that will help me in and around an array of environments. They're the kind of things that are important to us, and sport is a vehicle for that, and it's helped us bringing an inclusive system in and taking away any kind of limit to a team or this coach only coaches the best 12 players. That's really helped us to allow children to see that sport is open to everybody, to allow children to see that it is for everyone and you don't have to just be good at it to do sport. And we've tried to remove some of the barriers there and break some of the taboos. And our participation rate, tells its own story. We're a school of just under 1,000 students. We have a participation rate that's consistently touching 70% in terms of a child that has done one representative sport or more. So that isn't just attending trainings, that's actually representing the school in a sport or more, which is phenomenal. And it works because what we've tried to do in our school works for us, and we really focus on the strengths of what we've got, and we spend a lot of time in collaborating and in reflecting and in stopping and pausing, and that didn't happen overnight. You know, it took us 7 years to get where we're at, and it isn't perfect, and there are still squeaks and cogs that are missing and break now and again, and we're always looking to try and improve. But again, going back to what we said right at the beginning, I think that the key is make a start, have a why, you know, look what works in your context, share opinion, reflect, and then go for it. Have a pop, you know, be brave, bold, and make some strides forward. Alan.
I think in an international context, we have significant turnover of students. You think about someone who works at the British Embassy, that they're on a 2 to 3 year rotation. Someone who works in a bank, similar. So you could invest a huge amount of time in very talented individuals that then leave after 2 and 3 years. And that's what used to happen. And then there was nothing underneath that takes their place. So by putting an inclusive program together, you might have your star players all leave at the end of the year, but you've got an underneath, like a middle section, a broad section that just steps up and says, you know what, I've been there, I'm ready now. And that's just continually happened over the last 3 to 4 years. And you think, oh wow, like we've invested that time, it's so worth it, because they just come to the top. And we've been lucky to see in a 7-year period kids from year 5 go and graduate at 18 years old in our varsity football team, and it's just unbelievable to see. And there were kids there who weren't necessarily in the team in year 6, and they get to 18, and because of the systems we've put in place, they're becoming top performers. And it's that multi-sport approach, the inclusive approach, the way we've gone about it. It seems to work for us. It might not work for everybody, particularly big schools that can't accommodate a fully inclusive approach, but it works for our context with our kids.
Therefore, have a go, folks. So that's brilliant. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Gents, thank you so much for your time.